on it, which is what I always like to doodle around. And I don't normally use a flip chart for this preach. Oh, go on then, if you insist. I don't usually use a flip chart for this message, but as he'd done it, I thought I'd just put my 4 key points and 4 Bible verses, and that might help you a little bit. I feel like Paul Daniels with his assistant around here. It's like, I mean, I suppose I got the name Paul right, so that was good. So I just want to share something which I'm a little bit known for out of Bethel as a phrase, but I haven't actually preached on it very much. But the last few times I've preached on a Sunday, I've gone in this direction. And it's based on Romans 8:28. And the thing that I'm a little bit known for is the phrase, he wastes nothing, he gets you ready. And it's my translation of Romans 8:28. Romans 8:28 is usually translated, all things work together for good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose. I think he wastes nothing, he gets you ready. It's pretty good, personally. I think it works. It's shorter. You'd have a thinner Bible if you let me translate a lot more of it. And you could carry it around in your back pocket a bit easier. But he wastes nothing. Honestly, I don't think it's a preach. It's more of a declaration of our life story, of Susan, my life story. And I'm going to share some of our story, but the reason I'm sharing it is not so that you're impressed with my story. I want you to believe yours. And that's my goal. My goal is to encourage you to look at the detail of your life and to believe, trust, rely on your story. And just going to run through a few elements. There's also another translation of Romans 8:28, which some of you will know, the Passion Translation, and it's very beautiful the way it's written. So we are convinced that every detail of our lives is continually woven together for good. For we are his lovers who have been called to fulfill his designed purpose. And I like that, but I still think he wastes nothing, he gets you ready. It works pretty good for me anyway. And you can remember that. You can take it home with you. So I just want to talk about that just a little bit, give you a couple of Bible characters that I always lean on for this, because I really, really do believe this. I believe that he takes our lives and he makes sure that he wastes nothing. He gets us ready. And it's so often easy for all of us to look at periods of our lives, events that happen in our lives and think, was that a waste? Was that season a waste? I look at seasons of my life and I love that I can look at them now and see how God took them and used them for his purposes. The first character I always go to, so I try and land it on the Bible rather than just telling my story. But the first character I go to is Moses. Now, Moses is pretty much my favorite Old Testament character. And he's known for 2 phenomenal accomplishments. There's a lot more, but 2 big ones. He led the people of Israel, probably something like 1 million or so, plus children, from slavery in Egypt to the wilderness. And he stood on the edge of the Red Sea, and he understood something. He understood the power of God. But before that, before he got to that point, he had been instructed by God to tell the people of Israel, basically, my language, how to butcher a lamb. Now, my observation is that he was probably the only one of those million, that knew how to butcher a lamb. The rest of them were slaves. They were used to gathering clay, gathering straw, baking bricks, stacking bricks. But Moses spent 40 years looking after his father-in-law's sheep. And I'm pretty sure in that season he would have learned how to butcher a lamb, because every now and then I'm sure he wanted a lamb kebab for his supper. It's a simple illustration, but you could easily look at Moses' life and think, 40 years looking after sheep, but he wastes nothing. He gets you ready. Because Moses was the man most qualified to give the instructions on that Passover night. This is how you do this. And the second great event of his life, and I'm skimming them reasonably quickly, but the second great event of his life was the building of the tabernacle. And there in the middle of the wilderness, God invites Moses to climb up the mountain, where God would give Moses the instructions for building a tabernacle. Again, my observation is that if you read about the design of that tabernacle, and you've also been to an Egyptian exhibition at a museum, you will see a similarity between the two in the description. If you've ever been to something like Tutankhamun exhibition or something like that, and then read the instructions for building the tabernacle. Why is that important? Because Moses was invited to go up the mountain, given the instructions for building a tabernacle by God. And Moses was the only one who would have had an internal grid for what a palace looks like, because he was raised in a palace. He wastes nothing. He gets you ready. They're simple examples. Or take Peter, New Testament Peter. Peter, the one who's known for putting his foot in his mouth. But remember that incredible exchange between Jesus and Peter, where Jesus said, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter said, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus said to Peter, "On this rock I'll build my church." And Peter, when you read in the epistles, is the one who says, "And you are living stones." He understood something. That exchange became a principle on which Peter would build the church. He was looking around for the living stones in us. Or what about Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times? But again in the epistles, Peter writes, "Make all the more certain of God calling and choosing you." He wastes nothing. And I could go at reasonable length through many stories in the Bible and show you he wastes nothing. He gets you ready. And so many of us have been through, especially in these recent years, probably experiences of thinking, gosh, that season was a waste of time. What was that all about? And I really just want to encourage you this morning. I want to encourage you that he knows you, he sees you, he loves you, he values you, and he is intent. In fact, he is more intent on Romans 8:28 being fulfilled in your life than you are. He wastes nothing. I just give you a few extracts from my story, and inevitably the older you get, the longer your story gets. But I was saved in 1973, actually the day my father died, and gave my life to Jesus that day. I prayed a very simple prayer. A little while after that, I started going to the church that Sue was at, which would be when I met her, and about a year after my dad died, Sue's dad died, and shortly after that, Sue and I began dating. We were very, very young when that happened, extremely young. So we've been together a little while now. And about 2 years after that, I was on an evangelism training school, and it's actually a leaders training school. And while I was there, I heard God really tell me that one day I would work in Christian ministry. I went home from that event and I wrote to Sue's grandfather, who was the president of the European Christian Mission, a great man of God and a pioneer in many respects in Europe. And I wrote to him and I asked for some advice. I said, how do I get ready for this call on my life? And I was expecting him to tell me what seminary to go to, where to study theology, but he didn't. He told me to go and get some experience working with people. Very good advice. I've met some pastors who really would have benefited from that advice. It would have helped them get some experience working with people. And so I would train as a psychiatric and general nurse at the London Hospital, Whitechapel, which definitely qualifies as experience working with people, especially the psychiatric part. I can still remember my first patient that I looked after, and when I ducked the very large TV that he hurled across the room, it was definitely gaining some experience working with people. And that was a proper TV, not these baby skinny ones. It was a real one, you know. How that man picked it up with one arm and slung it across the ward, I do not know. So I worked as a nurse, and then having trained, qualified, I was a staff nurse in intensive care. And I then left that career, which I definitely loved, and joined the prison service of England and Wales for the supremely profound and deeply spiritual reason, because often people are looking for really spiritual reasons and think that if only they get the spiritual reason for changing jobs, God will bless it. Well, I changed jobs because we couldn't afford to pay the bills. And he wastes nothing. He gets you ready. So I joined the prison service of England and Wales, spent 2 years working as a prison officer, and then spent 17 years working as a prison governor of various grades, and was eventually deputy governor of Feltham and governor of a prison out in Oxfordshire. During that time, I developed a number of skills and trained in various things. They will become relevant why I'm telling you in a minute, but I'm a hostage negotiator trainer, which is bizarre. I'm probably the only one here, I would imagine. So don't take Hugh hostage, because I can take care of it. I'm a riot commander, and I was also sent to Cambridge towards the end of my career to get a degree in strategic planning and prison management and organisational leadership. Roughly is my working career in this country. During that time, Sue and I got married and had our 2 sons. We were in a congregational church for about 23 years, and then in the mid-1990s we went to a church that was pursuing much more of what you would be pursuing here. I'm not sure what title I would put on it, but it was a Randy Clark friendly church. Let's just leave it there. That's probably the best description. And then in 2001, Sue and I, Sue actually had already been 8 times before me. From 1999 till 2001, she went to Bethel before anybody knew there was a Bethel. And then in 2001, we followed what God had said to Sue, which was Bethel will be your home, and together we'd agreed on that. And so we flew out of London Heathrow 4 days after the terrible events of 9/11 in 2001. We got on the first plane out of England, actually, to America. It was a very strange and quiet and half-filled flight, and went to Bethel. And I did 1 year school of ministry, and then I was invited to join the senior team there, which I still consider myself to be the most surprised man I know that happened to me. There are a number of elements, but I just want to highlight a few, because for me, all I'm trying to do, I don't want you to believe my story. I mean, it's true. Everything I tell you is the truth. But my goal is that you believe yours. That's my absolute goal. I want you to believe your story, and I'll tell you why it's so important at the end, when I get to the bottom right-hand quadrant. But let me just give you a few highlights. The first thing is I find myself as a leader in a growing church, a church that would eventually have a global influence. I've not been to theological school or seminary, anything like that. I'm a nurse and a prison governor. What qualified me to be on the team? And how did I actually begin to minister? Actually, I began teaching strategic planning workshops to church leaders from around the world. Where was I trained? In the prison service. I led 150 strategic planning workshops in a prison. That's where I was trained. And God wastes nothing. He took what I'd learnt there, converted it in the atmosphere and the teaching of Bethel, and had me teaching church leaders around the world about how to develop visions and missions and such like. There are many ironies in it, but he wastes nothing. He gets you ready. And not only that, he had Egypt pay the training fee, which I think's just like God. Read your Bible. Egypt paid for the tabernacle. In 2008, another part of my story where I can demonstrate that he wastes nothing, he gets you ready. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2008, and my 3-month journey, which included surgery, I've now been cancer-free for the last, whatever that would be, 14 years. At the end of my 3 months, pretty much off work, recovering from surgery, they asked me to preach on Sunday night. I really didn't have a prepared preach. I was asked, typical Bethel style, I was asked on Saturday to preach Sunday night, and all I had was a journal. I had my journal of my 3 months of walking through that journey. And in the middle of my message, I made a statement that I had no idea was as radical as some people consider it to be, and that statement was, surgery is not a second-class healing. A man made contact with me shortly after that, a man who is now a friend of mine called Ted Sawchuk, and he is a urologist. He performs something like 75 of the same surgeries that I had per year. But he would go to church beating himself up and feeling that he was a second-class minister of the kingdom compared to people who pray for the sick. And he contacted me and he said, Paul, your statement is the single most important lesson I have learned in my medical career. Surgery is not a second-class healing. He said, that's profound. And together, he and I have done 2 or 3 medical healing conferences. The first